Friends, welcome back to the show. I'm super excited today because I have not only a client of mine, but a good friend of mine. We've become close friends in the last, I don't know, about 7 months or so, right? And so my friend Glenn has been going through and has fought through an intense legal battle for parental rights in Japan. And he, in the last decade or so, he has churned his experience into this amazing book called Too Big to Care. And today we're diving into his journey, what he learned, and why his story matters for workplaces everywhere. You guys, working with Glenn the last couple of months has been really eye-opening to discover the layers and layers and layers of parental rights and how big organizations, big companies, something that we feel like should be a no-brainer to take parental rights, to have parental rights, to take some time off, was something that he had to really struggle with. Glenn, my friend, welcome to the show. I'm super excited that you're here because we have some good questions to ask you, but also I know you have a story full of ups and downs that I feel like I need people to listen to and hear about. So thanks for coming on the show today, my friend.
Thanks very much, Hussein. It's great to be here, and it's fun to work with you. Thanks very much for all your help and support through this.
Yeah, absolutely. Glenn, I mean, again, you didn't really write a book, man. You're on a mission, and you're on a mission to really change the way we see parental rights. But before we get into all that, what was the moment that made you realize you had to write Too Big to Care?
So my son was born in 2015, and it was an emergency situation. So the hospital called and said, this is life or death. Your son might not make it. And I got all these pictures on my phone that basically, showed my newborn infant who was born prematurely with tubes attached to him, and literally it looked like he wasn't going to make it. And I was just, as you can imagine, devastated and in shock and didn't know what to do as a first-time parent. So I went into work. I got there really early before everybody came, and I talked to my boss and I tried to explain the situation. But basically the response was, well, that's too bad. Get back to work. And I was all set to get on an airplane because he was born overseas, so I needed to fly to get to him. And basically they said no. They said no, get back to work. So that was the first trigger for me that kind of made me realize that you can't motivate employees like this. You can't keep employees when you don't allow them to, in a situation like that, there's only one proper response from management, and that is go. But that wasn't the final straw, Hussein. I would say, to answer your question, the final straw is, as a manager, when I started digging into the situation at work, I realized that this was systematic throughout the organization. That at Mitsubishi and Morgan Stanley in Japan, they were actually pushing women out when they got pregnant. So just the fact that someone showed that they were going to have a family or were interested in having a family or basically a life outside of work, that meant treason to this company, and those people would be fired. That was the moment in me that I realized that I've been given a mission, that this is something that doesn't matter what country you're in, it doesn't matter what culture you're in. If people cannot have a career and a family, then it's not going to work. It's not sustainable. You can talk about SDGs and ESG all you want, but if a company doesn't allow the people and the employees to have both a career and a family, then you're basically done, and your company is not going to make it in 2025. That was the trigger that got me to write this book.
Remarkable. How resilient. So in those moments, in those intense moments at the beginning, what ended up happening? Did you end up going to go see your son and sort of being like, you know what, screw you, I'm going to go be in this moment for my kiddo? And then what happened after?
Yeah, so I'd been in financial services for 20 years. I'd risen to top management, and my career was really important. And I realized that going forward, having a family, I'm going to need a career and an income even more than I ever did. So I was very cautious and I was very worried about this. This gave me so much stress. I was like, well, I have to go for my family. Family always has to come first. On the other hand, the company was sitting there threatening me, saying, if you go, we're going to fire you. It's going to be considered an unexcused absence from work to go and be in an emergency situation with my family. So I negotiated. I talked with HR. I talked with senior management at the company. There was only a couple layers of management above where I was. And frankly, everybody was very hard about the situation. There was very little empathy or sympathy. It was just, these things happen. Get back to work. And so I had to make a very difficult decision. And I made a decision, obviously, to support my family. There's, in my heart, even today, there's no other decision to be made. And because I did that, eventually I was fired.
It's tough, man. So what ensued later was obviously a legal battle that you went through, and it's an uphill battle because you are fighting a giant, too big to care, right? And I want to talk a little bit about this because the subtitle for this is, I think, the essence of your journey, right? Adopt sustainable business practices or embrace defeat. Can you tell me a little bit about how this idea started to formulate? And I get it, obviously as leaders and managers, and there's so many people out there that have tons of employees that run and work alongside them. But this concept of you can't take time off, especially for an emergency, how that sort of started to conceptualize this concept of what does adopting sustainable business practices actually mean to you? And what do you mean by embrace defeat? How does that create the tension between the two areas?
So as I was looking into this and I was doing research for the book and going through my own experience, I kept finding, SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations, kept coming up, as well as ESG investment, which is basically environmental, social, and corporate governance investing, as well as the word sustainability is just widely used nowadays for corporations and for governments. But frankly, I found in my situation is a great example of this. I found that most people don't know what that means. They get told, the top management phones the sub manager or whatever and says, we got to do something about SDGs. I write about this in the book, but then the manager says, well, what's that? All I'm doing is trying to make money here. What's going on? What, you mean I have to do something else now? And there's a lot of confusion about this whole topic. And so what I did is just tried to cut through all that alphabet soup and all the rhetoric and just say, okay, the fact is no matter what political side you're on, whether you're far left, far right, it doesn't matter. If you don't do 1, 2, 3, 4 in 2025, you're not going to have a business. That's what sustainability means. If you think about the word sustainability, it just means an ongoing concern. It's not some, we use it as some fancy word, and companies tend to then adopt it and use it for greenwashing and trying to cover up what they're actually doing. The fact is what sustainability actually means is just to be an ongoing, profitable business. And in 2025, that means putting people first, taking care of your people, allowing people to have a family and a career, providing an environment where work-life balance isn't a dream, but it's a reality. And if you don't do that in 2025, you're not going to be you're going to go out of business. That's what embrace defeat means. You're going to go out of business. You're not going to make as much money. If you want to say it really bluntly, you're not going to make money if you don't do these things in 2025. So whether you're a greedy capitalist or a tree hugger, it doesn't matter. This is what you got to do in 2025 if you want to survive as a business, period.
Right. Yeah, and I feel like, especially now, as much as there's transparency and social media and everything just kind of being aired out in a company and in organizations, right? It really, in a way, it forces companies to think in a way that matters to employees. So you got to think bigger than just the profits. And actually, you're right. When you think bigger than that, the profits do come in because you're taking care of who matters most. The people bringing in this stuff, making it work, or making the thing. And I appreciate that so much. This is kind of why one of the biggest reasons I signed up to support and do my best to support your work is because I love authors who are not just authors writing a book, but really on a mission, and a mission to spread a message, and a message about something that could advance thinking around anything we do as humans, right? When you centered around parental rights, and as I soon trying to become a parent myself, I see the value in this even more and more. And again, when I was younger, I saw the value in it, but now more than ever, I see why not only is this important, but how it actually benefits a business when you lean into those things. It's like saying, we don't use these chemicals. Okay, great. That's a good thing that you're not doing in your company. Okay, yeah, we're transparent, and we have these kinds of financial transparency things in our business. That's great too. But having parental rights at the center is actually the most sort of appealing and sort of seems like easy, no-brainer thing to do, because most of your employees are probably going to be parents. And if we help them sort of with those things and put that at the center, then they want to be there because they know that you're going to help them when things come up. They know that you're going to have their back when their kid is sick, their kid needs to go to the hospital, whatever it is, right? Or just being there for them. I need a day off to be there with my kid because they have a recital tonight, whatever it is. Like, I think those simple things that I guess in some cases, we kind of take for advantage. And in most cases, we can't take for advantage because it's not really offered there. But I want to talk a little bit about this pressure of, in different cultural society, different cultural norms, especially as a male, to take time off while your wife is having a child is almost frowned upon. Now, I know that things are changing, and in fact, I would say with everything that I've learned from you and working with you, we went in Japan specifically. We went from like 3% people taking time off to now over 30% just in the last, let's say, decade, because of how much force you put behind this mission, which I think is incredible. Can you talk a little bit about, what this conversation really started in Japan and how it's kind of growing beyond that now?
Sure. So in Japan, they've got a demographic issue to start with, and they've known this has been coming for over 30 years now. And that demographic, basically, I believe it's because of non-sustainable practices, both in the government and in the corporate world in Japan. Namely, corporations not allowing people to have a family. And what that's resulted in is a decreasing population. That's what I mean when I say a demographic problem. So in Japan today, the population is decreasing by 1 million people a year. It's hard to imagine, but you can imagine, there's a lot of mid-sized cities in the US that have about 1 million people population. So one of those cities is disappearing every year in Japan. And that trend is actually escalating still, and I believe largely because of these non-sustainable practices. So in Japan, about 25 years ago, they put in place these laws, and the laws are for maternity and paternity leave. So it's basically parental rights laws that allow for both a man and a woman, and it doesn't, and marriage is not required. And it doesn't even have to be a blood relative. It can be an adoptive child. In any case, it allows for both men and women to take family time off. And that family time can be a year. And if there's no available childcare, even after a year, you can extend it for 2 years. So in fact, for the last 25 years, this law has been on the books that both men and women would be able to, in Japan, take parental leave. The fact is, however, is that it was just kind of a smoke and mirrors type of thing. So the government said, yeah, this is what we've decided, and this is what the law says. But corporations, especially large corporations, just operated and continue to operate above the law in Japan. So they just ignored it. And that's another reason why it hit so hard for me, because I was faced with this emergency situation, and friends told me, well, hey, in Japan you can take paternity leave. There's parental leave for everybody. And I went to the company and said, hey, there's this law that I didn't know about, but actually I'm eligible according to the law to take a year off. And,
Right.
and basically they laughed at me, and they treated me even more like I'd committed treason, like a villain, basically. And because you're not supposed to talk about this, you're not supposed to talk about this law that's on the books. And they didn't want to set a precedent, right? So if they allowed me to take parental leave, then everybody would want to take it, and they couldn't do that. That would be the end of the world. So yeah, that's kind of where this started. And as I dug into this, I realized that in many countries around the world, we don't even have standardized maternity leave. And I'm sad to say that the US is even one of those countries, right? So even in the US, there's not a standardized maternity leave policy for all women in the United States. So, you might expect it in some second or third world countries, but it's really shocking to see that even large developed countries sometimes don't have a standardized parental leave policy, or parental leave ethic is what it really is. And again, this is a basic human right. If, as you mentioned, most employees at some point are going to want to have a family. And if it's not a family, then they're going to need to take care of their parents, or there's going to be some family emergency where they're going to need to take a little bit of time off. And if the choice is to take that leave or to get fired, well, it's an impossible choice. It really is an impossible choice.
Yeah. And the funny thing is like, it's already pretty expensive to have a child. Let's just be honest here, right? It's very expensive. It's expensive for many reasons. However, it doesn't sway people to want to have children, especially not only because the company that they're working for doesn't really support it. Two, you're not getting the time off to enjoy the first few years even of having another human being in your life, in your care. And so people rush back to work as soon as they have the baby, and then we're sort of forced to put them into some sort of babysitting, nannies, childcare, which is also very expensive. So, I mean, obviously, this plays a role in, I'm assuming, why people are, I think globally the decline of having children is happening. It's just simply, not only is it just expensive, it's not supported by organizations and companies, and it sounds like it's not really supported by government either. And so what do you propose? What is obviously you started a company and you took this idea and you embedded it at the center of that company, and you started laying out like, how could this work as sort of an example so that other companies can adopt and grow from. Can you share a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So yeah, to get back to your first point, the equation is very, very simple. If you are a young couple, for example, and you're debating of whether to have a family or not, and you don't have parental leave, you don't have parental rights, then basically the equation is very simple. Both mother and father, or both partners, for example, would be working. And then to have a child would mean that at least one partner would have to quit their job because there's not parental leave. Someone's got to take care of the child. So then basically, and you're adding a new human being to your family unit. So then what you've got is you've got your costs doubling and your income being cut in half, right? And that equation is very, very simple. Most people cannot deal with that equation. So what is the response? Well, you delay having children. And in this day and age, for women, as we know in particular, delaying having children basically means not having children in the end. You might turn to IVF in the end, or you might try other methods. But the fact is that there's a clock running here, and you have to have children when you're relatively young. So yeah, the equation doesn't work. My answers, I've got many responses to this, Hussein, as you know, but obviously you have to put parental rights, you have to put human rights, you have to put people at the center of what you do. And that doesn't matter if you're a government or a corporation or frankly a family. People have to come first. You have to have a trust relationship. You have to have a relationship, and the stronger that relationship is with both, for example, if you're a corporation, with both your employees and your customers and all your stakeholders in your business, the more profits you're going to make, if you want to say it that way, the better business you're going to have, the lower your cost of equity is going to be, the lower your attrition rate amongst employees is going to be, the higher the motivation is going to be amongst your employees. And that's all this virtual cycle which leads to better profits and a more, quote, sustainable business operation. If you end up in a situation like Japan, where you're in this death spiral and you're losing 1 million people a year because of this problem, then I would argue you have to do something more drastic to change that situation, to turn the situation around. My movement and what I've proposed is part of that drastic movement. I just said, this is the equation. It's not working. There's laws on the books. Stop being so disingenuous and allow people to actually take the leave that you've offered them. And as a result, the government and corporations stepped up. And as you said, we went from basically 0 men taking paternity leave to this year, it's something like 250,000 men that are able to take paternity leave in Japan. So we've made a huge step forward because of my move. That's just the first step, though, Hussein. There's a myriad of things that corporations and governments can do to encourage people to have children that today they're not doing. One just idea I'll throw out there before I'll turn it back to you is I've suggested to the Japanese government, for example, just say from the day your first child is born until your last child turns 30 years old, you're exempt from all taxes in society. So what would that do? Would that encourage people to have children or not? I think it would. I think you'd have a baby boom. And I think with that baby boom, you would also have a revenue boom for the government. The short-term loss you would lose by giving a tax holiday to people for having children, you would more than gain back by turning around that demographic death spiral.
Right. And it doesn't mean not everybody's gonna, obviously not everybody's gonna want kids. I get that, right? But even at like 20% of the population who do want kids, guess what? All their kids are going to grow up and get jobs and start paying taxes too. So it's not like it's a loss technically, like you're saying, but it will help the economy. It will sustain the economy. It'll bring, a new workforce that's probably more technologically advanced and probably healthier because their parents are probably around a little bit more and taking care of them and enjoying their lives together. And I think that's what you mean by, this is what I love about your book. The word sustainability is beautiful because not only are you sustaining how governments should see this, you're also sustaining how companies should see this. And also as a society, I love this idea of I'm not trying to be fascist here or anything but it's just for a moment, if we know that this entire planet works together, right? The winds from the east go to the west, the sun rises, everything is working in tandem. Everything works together, whether it's trees, wind, animals, everything is interconnected. Why, when we lean into that and lean into the idea that since we're all interconnected, things that happen here in Japan or the US or whatever can fluctuate and move around the world. Not everybody needs to copy the same exact methodology, but it's your version of that methodology that helps sustain this world in a way that's beautiful, that's really humane and thoughtful and meaningful. And at the end of the day, we all get what we want, which is, not only time with our family and raising kids and all these beautiful things that's the human that's a big part of the human experience, not the human experience, right? But it's a big part of it. And I feel like I'm speaking from a young perspective here. I'm turning 40 and I'm just having my kid for the very reasons that you've talked about. I've always thought man, it's too expensive. It's too this, it's too that. I don't have enough healthcare, right? And I own my own business. So it makes it even that much harder, right? And there isn't huge tax incentives that I take advantage of by having a kid or anything like that. It's really okay, I want this experience as a human being and it's my choice and I'm going to do what I can to make sure that choice is balanced with my life and work and all of these things. However, no one's promoting that, right? Everyone's anybody you talk to at my age or even a little bit younger are I don't even know, there's no way I can have kids. It's just too expensive. You're thinking college, you're thinking about I don't even make enough money to make my ends meet, let alone other people's ends meet, right? And so that is so disheartening because, I don't understand what changed about growing an orange or growing food or whatever since the beginning of time. I don't know what justifies the constant expensive, year after year, things are just gotten, and this is me kind of rambling about the choices that we all get to have and make. But this is why I love your work and mission. And it is that mission. It's you bringing this idea and saying, you're not even thinking about the right concept here. We're talking about people, right? Like, you are people. And it's like, imagine if this was your child that was in the hospital or whatever, and you're the president of the company. What do you think you're going to do? Of course, you would take the day off and go handle things, or the week off, or whatever, right? At the end of the day, the business, especially if it's huge, it's running itself. It's a giant machine. So, again, I applaud your efforts, because they have not been easy, and you clearly define it throughout the book, and you write some really intense stories. So where do you see this going into the future? Give me an optimistic view that I can cling on to and take with me and share with others about what the future would look like as we implement more parental right, an optimistic view into companies and organizations. What does that look like for you, Glenn?
So companies and governments that adopt these basic principles that I highlight in this book are going to be extraordinarily competitive and very successful. And I'm very grateful to see that some corporations are looking at this book, looking at, I ask at the end of every chapter, I have a section called Guided Reflections, which basically is some questions for people to think about and answer for themselves, whether you're an individual or a corporation or a middle manager or a CEO. And I think if you go through those guided reflections, you'll kind of be an epiphany type of moment. This is it's not rocket science, right? If you treat people right and you give them the human rights that they deserve, you're going to create a virtual cycle in your business and in your country, in your economy. So people are going to feel valued. They're going to feel good about life. They're going to feel good about their career. They're going to like coming to work. If your employees don't like coming to work, you've got a problem. You've got a problem. So if in that environment, what happens? Well, they pass that on to their people that they're managing. They pass it on to their family. They pass it on to their customers, right? When the customer phones and they pick up the phone, you can tell right away if that person really loves their job, really loves to be there or not. So that's going to go on to the customers. Then the customers are going to be excited about buying your product or service. They're going to be fans of your business instead of having to buy your product. And as soon as someone has to buy your product, you better be careful, because they're going to be looking for other options. They're going to be looking for alternatives. Likewise, when investors then look at your company, they're going to see a lower attrition rate because the employees are highly motivated and they don't want to leave your company. They're going to see good products and good margins on your products because the customers are happy to do business with you, because when your employees answer the phone, they're happy, motivated, and love to be at work. And then the investors are going to want to invest in your company. And when you start getting that financial capital coming in through investment, what happens is your cost of equity goes down. In other words, it's cheaper for you to get money to run your business than it is for your competitors. And at the end of the day, your business succeeds and does better than the competitors. And so I see this as a virtual cycle, and the companies that are adopting these basic, very basic, simple principles, I think are doing better, are succeeding, and they're attracting better people. And when you attract better people, again, you're creating a virtual cycle. The smarter the people you have in your office, the more motivated they are, the more they're independent workers. They don't need to be micromanaged. If you find yourself having to micromanage your employees, you're doing something wrong. So again, I think the principles I lay out are very simple. And the companies that are adopting these principles, I think, are being very successful. And I'm very hopeful that as we spread this movement, as people read this book, as it catches on, that more and more companies, more and more economies, more and more governments will take a look at this and adopt these basic principles, which does spell out a very, very bright future for all of us.
Well said, my friend. I love that. That makes me very optimistic. Okay, so besides finding you on LinkedIn, where people can follow you and can learn so much from you, because you share about all this stuff consistently, and you're always trying to inspire organizations to think about this work in a unique way for themselves. But where can people find you? How can people support you? I worked on quite a bit of things for you, but I want you to share from your end, what supports you the most.
Thanks very much, Hussein. I appreciate you asking that. So obviously LinkedIn is a great place to find us and find the movement. There is a homepage, glenwoodparentalrights.com. Please take a look at that. We also have a petition on change.org that talks about these issues. It's a simple signature process. Anybody who would be willing to sign up on change.org that really moves things forward, and we really appreciate that. And lastly, just getting the book. We've got a whole bunch of very positive reviews on Amazon, but every review on Amazon really counts. So if anybody would take a few minutes and write even a short review on Amazon, I would greatly appreciate it.
I love that so much, my friend. Look, man, I got to tell you something. I'm grateful to know you, bro. You very much inspire me to follow my mission, to pursue the work that I get to pursue. I think from when we first talked, this really resonated with me because I try to fight for the voice of refugees and immigrants here in the States, and those who have been impacted by war and all those kinds of things. And we've had many of those conversations. And so, your voice really matters to me because here's a man who is a single father of 5, who works really hard. And on top of that, carries this tremendous weight of, talking about something that not very many organizations and people want you to talk about, because it puts them at a crossroad of having to change. And, we all know this. Change is very hard to do. No matter if you're Gandhi, no matter if you're Glenn Wood or everybody in between, like taking a chance to change the way we look at things is very difficult. So I commend your work, my friend. I'm grateful and honored to have met you and have been alongside you as you launched your book, as you allowed me to go in and develop your website and all this work. So I'm very honored, man. So I just want to say thank you. And whoever's watching out there, am I just saying that because, I'm grateful I got to work with Glenn and do all these things. But if you're out there and you're writing a book and you have a mission, your book is it's not just a thing that sits on a shelf. You got to take, now I just see Glenn putting the fire behind it, trying to get it in people's hands, trying to get on, podcast shows, trying to do different things that would move that needle forward. With the book sort of being at the epicenter, right? It's a way to start that conversation. So if you're out there and you're an author and you're working and you're saying, oh, no one's paying attention to me or my book, that's not how Glenn is approaching it. Glenn is taking the approach of, whose hands do I need to put this in? How do I ask for the right thing? Whose work? And mind you, Glenn is named Father of Japan because of how much intensity he's put behind this movement. So again, man, on that note, what's one thing that you would tell another author or an expert, and how you use your passion with, every ounce of your energy, man? And I always love that. What would you tell another expert or an author who has, maybe their version of their mission? What can they put behind it to get it out there?
So I'd say 2 things, if you'll let me. The first thing is change. The only constant in life is change, and the rate of change is accelerating. General MacArthur is famous for saying that if you don't love change, you're gonna like your relevance even less. So embrace change. Whatever you're writing, whatever mission you're on, whatever you want to do, however difficult it is, embrace change. And number 2, you have to believe in the product you're selling. So it doesn't matter. Frankly, your mission might be completely different than mine. And that's fantastic. Everyone's got their own mission. They've got their own values. They've got their own belief systems. You need to embody those, put a lot of passion behind it. And if you do that, people will follow. People will understand that what you're saying isn't just another piece of paper on the wall. It's not just another nice book cover. It's not just a bunch of pages filled with words, but this is a message, and it has meaning. Without that passion and the person behind that piece of paper, behind that group of papers that we call a book, then it really means nothing. And you can't expect people to buy or believe in a product that you don't yourself first and foremost believe in more than anything. And I'm a little bit radical, perhaps. I would die for this mission, because that's how much I believe in it. I made a promise to myself at one point that I'm going to do this for a number of reasons. But one of the main reasons is I want my kids to look back and say, this is what my dad did. And because my dad did this, I will never have to worry about parental rights. And that to me means everything. That is a huge part of my driving force. And I think whoever you are, whatever mission you're on, whatever book you want to write, make sure you have that driving force behind it.
Wow. What a beautiful way to wrap up this episode, my friend. Thank you so much, bro. Thank you so much for just, the only way I can say it is, thank you for having so much fire in your belly for the work that you get to do. It's an honor, man. Really, it is. And it's so cool to have worked alongside you. And if you're out there and you heard that message, apply just an ounce of that to your work, and I promise it changes things. Glenn, my friend, thank you so much for joining me today. If you're out there, go get the book, Too Big to Care, right now on Amazon, or go to the website, glenwoodparentalrights.com. I promise you, you won't be disappointed. Take care, y'all. Peace.